So there was an article that recently came out in the New York Times that looked at a couple different studies, all of which show that basically white people without a college degree are getting screwed. Surprise, surprise. So the study that this article led with was a study that came out earlier this year by the researchers Ann Case and Angus Deaton. If their names sound familiar, it's because they're the researchers who coined the term deaths of despair a few years ago and have been kind of on that beat since then. And what their study found is that overall, red states are now less healthy than blue states, which is kind of a reversal of what used to be the case. And or at least one major driving factor behind this is that health and life expectancy for whites without a college degree in those states, as I was saying, is declining. So I want to read a quote from one of the researchers, Ann Case. She writes, "Education divides everything, including connection to the labor market, marriage, connection to institutions like organized religion, physical and mental health, and mortality. It does so for whites, blacks, and Hispanics. There has been a profound, not yet complete convergence in life expectancy by education. There are two Americas now, one with a BA and one without." And I feel like I should say quickly here that I think, in this case, education is really just a proxy for class and maybe to a lesser extent occupation. And I have some thoughts specifically about, what it means that life expectancy for white workers without a college degree is dropping and what we on the left should make of that fact and what we should do about it strategically. But first, Cale, let me hand it over to you for your 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the one hand, it's just a confirmation of something that, something Jacobin has tried to emphasize, and I think people serious on the left have understood for a very long time, which just is the fact that in capitalism, the society we live in, the number one cleavage is class. Like that is the thing that most significantly divides people up, and that determines their chances in life, what they have to do. It sets up the choices they have to make on a daily basis. And like you're saying, yeah, education typically does kind of serve as the proxy insofar as some of that just has to do with the fact that polling and data collection is kind of insufficiently attuned to class categories. But there is and even right now, there's kind of an odd shift happening right now where many people with college degrees are in working class occupations with working class living standards. Obviously, teachers come to mind, but there's plenty of other people who work in what we would understand as working class jobs with a degree. That being said, it's nevertheless totally the case that education is one of these defining markers of those with a certain lifestyle that you would call working class and those that have something more middle class or professional or managerial or whatever in that more kind of that strata of society. And I think the left does an insufficient job of kind of parsing out the actual class and economic categories from the political ones. And so it's of course true that one of the main reasons why these red states that do have more, white workers, white people in general, whatever, that they have worse outcomes, social outcomes, but also the people in those states as part of the study that also have lower expectations for life getting better, of kind of their anticipation for something in the future is more and more bleak than people in blue states. And obviously a lot of that has to do just with the the policies in those states, the actual social infrastructure or the lack thereof. But we on the left can't just stay in the world of politics and say, well, these are people who want bad things. They they have bad opinions, bad culture, bad attitudes, bad worldviews, and they want to hurt others. They want to strip away that social infrastructure, because overwhelmingly that's not true when you actually get to know these people. That for the most part, most people, working people, poor people, are good and rational. They care about others. They want good outcomes for other people in their lives. They maybe even want good outcomes for people they don't know, but they certainly, are looking to protect the ones they care about. And those are all totally good, positive impulses that people have. The problem is that they live in a deranged, like falling apart society where like, you know, the option that seems the most credible is the politicians that say, you know, we're going to protect those like limited things you have, as opposed to, you know, the other party, which is, you know, the Democrats saying, you know, basically, they've been the party of NAFTA, of international trade, of, you know, of corporate finance, of pharma, of you know, Silicon Valley, of that. The actual presentation of politics is that we really don't care about you guys. You're the losers in life, and we're here for the middle class winners.
Right. Yeah. I think that that I agree with all of that, of course. And I want to say that I think, or part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this New York Times article and by extension these studies is I think that they have some interesting implications for like the way that we talk and think about race, not just of white workers, but like of Black people, of Black workers as well. And to kind of underscore that, Ann Case and Angus Deaton have a prior study where, again, they looked at rates of mortality between people of different races with different degrees of education, which again, they're kind of using as a proxy for class. And what they found was that prior to the year 2000, Black people with a college degree and Black people without a college degree looked more similar to each other in terms of life expectancy than they did to whites, right? And white people with a college degree and white people without a college degree looked more similar to each other with regard to mortality and life expectancy than they did to Blacks. So that's to say that, you know, prior to the year 2000, there appeared to be more of a discrepancy between white people as a group and Black people as a group when it comes to things like mortality and life expectancy. I'm sorry, I'm saying the same words over and over. But anyway, so moving forward, what they found is that after the year 2000, that's not true anymore. And it's particularly not true after, you know, 2008, 2010, which of course we know is the Great Recession. And so that was a little bit of a mouthful, but to kind of summarize what I'm trying to say, or like what this study seems to demonstrate, is that now, you know, there's much more of a discrepancy in terms of life expectancy within race than there is between races. So that's all to say that, like, you know, it doesn't make sense to talk about like Black mortality versus white mortality at this point. Rather, again, as this study and many other studies point out, the main sort of cleavage is class.
Yeah. No, I mean, that it's something that, again, the left and socialists used to understand, that like insofar as like they understood, they had like a mapping of society of like what is kind of the determining factors. And insofar as, like you're saying, you know, maybe several decades earlier, you could have made this more kind of like racial mapping make more sense. And even then, of course, like doesn't really change any kind of left politics, or shouldn't have. It did, unfortunately, historically, but it shouldn't have. That, you know, people, you know, we still should have been dealing with universal rights and privileges and material redistribution of both of like economic resources, but also of power. Like none of that should have been altered, and it was. But it's even more the case now that like society is reflecting like how we kind of have understood capitalism for the longest time in like the most vulgar sense. It's becoming more vulgar, where it really just is, if you're poor, regardless of what you look like, what your skin color is, your gender, whatever. You know, if you're on minimum wage, there is no gender pay gap. There is no racial pay gap. Like, you know, that's,
yay.
Right. Well, that's where it's like most of these, like the disparity stuff mostly still just is like among middle class people. And that's in part why working class people resent this stuff and think it's like demeaning, because it's basically like you don't actually have any idea what we're dealing with. And just the last point is that the left, like, is also behind the curve on all of this, that like the left, like insofar as it buys into these kind of more middle class liberal distinctions of like mapping society, and they write off white people, white working class people, it's a massive major mistake, because you know, white people, white workers are just as important and valuable as Black workers, are just as valuable and important as Hispanic workers or Asian workers, whatever. That we as socialists say the working class is the actual like social agent that can actually lead to a better world, that like actually realizing their interests of their values, their actually like providing material security in a universal way to their benefit actually creates a world that is to every single person's benefit.
Right. And I mean, in addition to, the kind of moral case, which is nothing to sneeze at, there's also a strategic case. There are still a lot of white people in the US. Most people are white. I know that sometimes is may feel like a surprise or whatever, but, we don't believe in demographic destiny. We're going to get into that with Rui Teixeira, but, there are many reasons why we can't just wait for white people to disappear. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. B, even if that did happen, as Rui gets into later, that is not a recipe for success. Yeah. And finally, I just want to say, on this point, I think we've talked about this before on the show, but I think that, the kind of impulse, especially from a lot of progressives, to frame what could otherwise be sort of universal bread and butter concerns as, quote, racial justice issues, always is going to have diminishing returns because of what we just talked about. So by that, I mean, lots of people wanted to make student debt relief a racial justice issue or frame it that way. Lots of people, want to talk about the minimum wage as a, quote, racial justice issue. And I suppose part of me sort of understands that, that is an attempt to convey a kind of moral urgency. But I think that, like I said, it will have diminishing returns just because of the way that, class operates in the US right now.
Yeah, true. I think that's totally true. But I think we can make the stronger claim that it's also morally insufficient, that the privileging of a fake category of people like a race is completely wrong. That the socialist project, the reason why the better account of the racial justice argument is, of course, it's to eliminate racial inequities because we actually want to move the floor up for everyone, that we want universal guarantees of life, regardless, that we make that it's not basically that our politics is the elimination of racial distinction.
Right.
And that's not, and we say that not because we are really into class. The point is that we think.
Oh, are you not into class?
No, I mean, it's the worst fucking thing in life. That's the whole point.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's you get rid of the racial distinctions and you get rid of the classes, and you have a society where everyone's needs are met appropriately and people treat each other as genuine equals. That's the ambition. And insofar as the left isn't doing that and is reifying these categories, is making racial distinctions more real, you're completely undermining your project. Sorry, left. Got to get on it. What are we waiting for?
Well, Cale, on that cheery and optimistic note, as always, should we get into the bulk of today's show?
Yeah, let's do it.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.